Hello, my name is Connor Pulley. I would like to ask you a question. When was the last time you read a poem? Or a better question, when was the last time you wrote a poem? It is in my opinion that poetry is an extremely useful but underutilized tool in schools. Poetry, for hundreds of years, has been used by people to convey their emotions, especially in the midst of difficulty. W. H. Auden once wrote The More Loving One. If mutual affection cannot be reached, let the more loving one be me. That is an excerpt of one of her poems, and it conveys a very common emotion of loving someone who doesn't love you back. Or Emily Dickinson's poem, After Great Pain, a Formal Feeling. In that poem, she talks about how after a loss, when in the midst of grief, in the midst of mourning, there's that numbness, something that everyone can relate to, especially adults. But poetry has been very useful for me as an outlet as well. Granted, I am not a published poet in any kind of way, but I've written several things myself, and it's helped me it's helped me a lot in more difficult points in my life. I only wish that I had known about it earlier, I guess, as not that I didn't know about poetry, just I hadn't considered it as a outlet therapeutically. It's not a word, it doesn't feel like a word. But when I was in school, especially around junior and senior year, I had went through a long chain of difficulty. My mom was diagnosed with cancer, which was a very scary time. A very dear friend of mine passed away at the age of 18, which was weird, as best as I can describe it. And I'd lost a lot of family for various reasons, just people getting old, people passing away, that kind of thing. It was just rough. I'd become very depressed. And, granted, my faith has a lot to do with how I pulled through that, but another thing that really helped me to not just deal with my emotions, but kind of make sense of them, was to write about it. Poetry is a really good avenue for that, because a lot of emotions can't be described in one word. If anyone who's ever experienced a loss knows that you're not just sad. Sad doesn't begin to describe a loss, especially when it's someone you were close to. When you're mourning someone, it is so much deeper. And I think about that now, about how helpful it's been for me. And I wonder how many kids today don't understand that. Don't understand how useful it is. Kids that could be going through the same thing I have been going through the same things that you may have gone through while you were young. And, and this is why we should use this today. There are many students today that are going through those difficult situations and are just like me, and they didn't know that this was a good avenue for it. Poetry is touched on in many English courses, but is rarely used as a teaching tool. When poetry is introduced, it can be used to help the teacher form a relationship with the student and understand the student a little bit deeper about what they're going through, help them to, if the student's experiencing some learning difficulties that may be rooted in emotion or things going on at home, and student to history relationship. Poetry, especially written by poets like Emily Dickinson, she died a long time ago, and some of her poems are very specific to the time period. And that can and when you have poetry which delves deep into emotion and helps you to it helps you relate to someone, even someone like Emily Dickinson, who lived many, many, many years ago, and the last kind of relationship that can build is a a student-self relationship. It helps the student become more understanding of their own emotions and things like that. And I know that a lot of this sounds like just a bunch of hippie jargon, and anybody who knows me knows that is not my deal. I just enjoy English, and I know how useful writing can be in those type of terms. But overall, poetry isn't just an art form. It's not. It helps to preserve personal perspectives of people's lives. It's a lens that brings us closer to understanding not just those from the past, but those around us as well. As we continue to read and write poetry, we can see that this outlet provides a uniqueness and a skill that is rarely seen. So I encourage every student to start writing their feelings through and thoughts into poetry, to feel the emotions, understand the context, and let it enrich their understanding of life and history. And to every educator, I strongly urge you to consider poetry among your teaching tools to help foster the young minds.